I was refreshing my IB results page at, 757, 758, 759. Just
stared at my screen for a bit, trying to comprehend the fact that I had gotten 45 out of 45.
Utter disbelief.
I didn't know how to react. I was just like, oh my gosh.
As soon as I saw the 7 in Chinese A, I was like, wait, this might actually happen for me.
I still haven't processed it.
And when I saw the words 45 points, I just started bawling. It was a very surreal moment for me. In the future, I hope to be studying dentistry at either the University of Hong Kong or at King's College London.
I'll be studying at the University of Pennsylvania, planning to either major in mathematical economics or English.
Social anthropology at LSE in London. Once the pandemic hit, I sort of started thinking about what makes us as individuals and puts us into groups, and I realized that really the glue of society almost is the culture, like culture binds us. I really wanted to pursue this curiosity of mine, so what better way to do that than to travel to another country abroad to study social anthropology.
English and psychology at the University of British Columbia. And after that, I plan to pursue a career in speech therapy.
I want to study medicine. I wanted to find a career that was able to somehow bridge interacting with people and really engaging and understanding people, and combining that with a scientific perspective. I thought medicine was, I guess, really the perfect thing to study.
I'm going on to study linguistics in Canada, and I hope that this degree will help me go on to speech therapy.
I've decided to go to the UK and study chemical engineering in Imperial College.
I'm hoping to study medicine at a local university in Hong Kong.
Chemistry or biochemistry in the University of Toronto. Especially after the pandemic, I realized how important healthcare system is in the world, so I thought that maybe training to biochemistry would be very applicable in the future.
I'm thinking to go to the Chinese University of Hong Kong for medicine.
I'm planning to study chemistry either at the University of Hong Kong or in the United Kingdom. And seeing as we're currently facing a climate crisis, I thought that studying chemistry could really allow me to give back and do research that could benefit the climate crisis and help solve the problems we're facing in the 21st century.
The London School of Economics and Political Science, and I'll be studying data science.
Politics, psychology, law and economics at the University of Amsterdam. So many issues nowadays can't be solved just by drawing from one subject. So I really wanted to continue this interdisciplinary education at university so I can better understand and address the many issues that we face in the 21st century.
Medicine in Hong Kong, although I haven't decided exactly which university I'll be going to, but I'm very excited to start my new journey.
Hello, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to welcome you all to this Medical Pathways webinar and just introduce my two colleagues that are going to be very important to this evening. So Dr. Carol Song is our Medical Pathways advisor, and she works very closely with all of the students that apply to medicine, dentistry or veterinary medicine. And Martin Kwok is one of our HE team, one of our guidance counsellors that helps students with their selection process of universities in all sorts of courses, including the medical related ones. This talk, for some of you, if you attended the one in February this year, you'll find it's actually the same talk. So we know that some of you might have signed up already, having attended one of these in February. So that's absolutely fine if you want to sit and listen again, but we did just want to make sure you knew that we were going to be repeating a lot of the same information. We also think there might be 1 or 2 year 12s out there, and again that's fine for you to listen to this, but Dr. Song is going to do another webinar specifically for year 12 medical pathway applicants that'll be a lot more detailed and a lot more tailored to where you are in the application process. So again, you might find it's better to wait and join us for that later session, but if you want to stay for this one, you're more than welcome. During the talk, there is a Q&A box right at the bottom of the screen. So if you do have any questions that you want to pose as Dr. Song is talking, then just jot your question into that Q&A box, and Martin and I will be in the background doing our best to answer those questions, or we'll leave them and pose some of them to Dr. Song right at the end once she's finished speaking. I would ask you though to wait until we're about 10-15 minutes into the presentation before you start putting any questions in, because what you'll probably find is a lot of your questions are going to be covered during the presentation itself. So if you can just hold fire and kind of listen to the initial stages and then start putting your questions through, we'll do our best to answer them. And anything that we can't cover this evening, we'll get back to you with at a later date. We obviously can't answer very specific individual student questions. This is not the forum to be saying, you know, my son or daughter is doing this, this and this, and what do you think about that? This is more general medical pathway kind of information and advice giving. So again, if it's something that's very specific to you as an individual or your child as an individual, please contact us separately about that, because we're not going to be able to answer that in this forum this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Carol, and Martin and I are going to disappear. So thank you, Carol.
Okay, hopefully then the sound is okay for me. Just bear with me just a second. I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that we can see the same slides. Okay, so as Ms. DC just mentioned there, I'm going to be covering quite a few different things. So it's going to be a packed talk, but don't worry too much. We will be sending out, probably sometime next week, we'll be sending out a copy of the slides and also an information sheet that accompanies this with lots of useful links. So there's no need to panic about writing everything down. You will get a copy of what we're using tonight with an information sheet to accompany that. So I think just listening and perhaps posing some questions that are pertinent is probably the best thing to do. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is mostly our focus is going to be on the UK and Hong Kong, because this is where we have the most experience. Mostly we do have medical applicants. Occasionally we do have some veterinary and some dentistry students as well, but again, the majority of our focus is on medicine, given that's our most popular pathway. We'll present you with some successful student profiles from the last 2 years, and a little video as well from our some of our recent graduates who have just started their journey in medical school. Will share their perspectives with you as well. We'll go through the application process, what the key components are to making a competitive application, a little bit briefly about the interview format, tiny little bit about choosing university, and sort of the timeline of things that you should be doing at what stage and what to expect. And as was mentioned in the introduction, we will have a more specific talk next term for year 12, which will be a lot more kind of geared towards examination taking and the nitty-gritty of the pathway process and the weekly sessions that we'll do together. And then finally, we'll come with a Q&A. We'll finish off with a Q&A at the end. Okay, let's get straight into it. So just the last 2 years, we'd like to share some of our student stories with you. So this is the class of 2021. That year we had quite a big cohort. There were 13 students who applied for medicine, dentistry and veterinary. That was broken down into 10 students for medicine, 2 veterinary and 1 dentistry. And you can see the breakdown here. So we had a number of students offers from Hong Kong U, from CUHK, a few universities in the UK, and also in Ireland. We had 2 veterinary students, one of which was successful in the UK and one for whom was attending veterinary school now in New Zealand. And then we also had a successful offer for Cardiff dentistry, which was declined by the student. So that was our pathway program participants in 2021. Last year, so 2022, this most recent graduating class, we only had 7 students. So this was a much smaller cohort, and all 7 were actually applying for medicine. And so of that 7, the current breakdown is there are 3 currently attending Hong Kong University, 1 at CUHK, 1 currently at Queen Mary's, and 1 in Liverpool as well. Unfortunately, one of our students was not successful in gaining entry, but I will also say that for that student, I think we would advise him, we initially advised him not to apply for the pathway. He didn't quite have the right profile, and that did actually end up being the case. So to give you a little bit of an idea, we'll just give you a few individual student profiles. So student one is a second-year student now at Hong Kong University. As you can see here, these are his academic breakdowns and a few little key points about them. So very strong point score at IB, 45, and his HLs were in biology, chemistry, and AA maths. 45, for those of you who don't know, is the full IB score, so that's the highest grade you can achieve. IGCSE grades also extremely strong, A stars and A's, A stars and 9s, beg your pardon, mostly, and 17, 16. Particularly the ones to note are his chemistry, physics, and biology grades, which were all at 9s. So this student elected to take both types of entrance tests for the UK, which is fairly unusual. That's what the BMAT and the UK CAT are. And they received offers from KCL, Newcastle, HKU, COHK, which is Chinese University of Hong Kong, and was unfortunately unsuccessful for Cambridge and UCL. So something else to note about this student is that he had a very competitive UCAT score of over 3,000, which is right at the upper end of the spectrum of scores. And he was successfully interviewed at Cambridge. However, there was no offer. So this is a typical profile of a student ending up in Hong Kong. So this is a student who was a recent graduate from this summer. He is now a first-year student at Liverpool Medical School in the UK. So an IB point score of 42, with his HLs being 6 in biology, 7 in chemistry, and 7 in psychology. This student elected to take the UK CAT, the entrance test for most universities in the UK. Again, as you can see, very strong profile in his GCSE grades, triple 9s in triple biology, chemistry, and physics. And again, a wide range of 9s, A stars, A's, and 8s. This student was successful in gaining offers from Liverpool and was offered a place at CUHK as well. And he was not successful at Edinburgh, Queen Mary's, and Cardiff. Again, this student scored a very competitive UK CAT score, and you're hopefully sort of starting to get the sense of the profile of a successful student. We wanted to share a dentistry and a veterinary one with you as well. Our most recent successful dentistry student who is currently studying dentistry is actually from 2020. So this is a student, again, extremely strong academic profile, 45 points and 3 7s at HLs in maths, chemistry, and biology. This was back when the science grades were still at A's and A stars, and he got 3 A stars. And again, as you can see, very, very strong GCSE grades, A's and A stars across the board. Good UK CAT score and successful offers from HKU Dentistry and Queen's in Belfast, but not from KCL, Plymouth, and Cardiff. I think the interesting thing about this student is you can see, even though he was extremely academically able, he found the interview process a little bit more challenging, and that probably is the reason why he didn't gain more offers than HKU and Queen's Belfast. However, he is now studying to be a dentist at Hong Kong U. The final student we'd like to share is a student who's a successful veterinary candidate. So again, 44 points at IB, very, very high as well. Highest being 7s in biology, chemistry, and English. Again, triple 9s across the board for biochem and physics at GCSE. For this student, the universities he was applying to, no entrance tests were required. That is common for veterinary medicine. And he was successful in all of the universities he applied for. So that was Glasgow, Liverpool, and RBC in London. He only applied for those 3 vet schools. I think the most notable thing about the student, apart from obviously his academic prowess, was his absolutely excellent work experience profile and extremely strong interview performance, leading to success across every single university that he applied to for veterinary medicine. So I think with these 4 students, we wanted to give you a flavor and a sense of the types of students who are successful at gaining entry. So at this point, I would just like to share a short 4-minute video with you. These are students who recently graduated in 2021 and 2022, and they're a mixture of veterinary and medical students.
I believe it was right before the start of IB.
I started around like year 11 or year 12.
I was relatively late in the process.
In mid-year 12, I think it was, like back in March or April.
For me, what I struggled with the first time around was the interviews the most. Just kind of speaking in a non-robotic, like natural way, like opposite someone who's marking you. You know, without practice, that's pretty tough. And the medical pathway just gives you lots of opportunities to practice that and get it wrong quite a few times. So yeah, so you can get it right then in the actual interview.
I feel like what works best for me is to create a schedule. So personally, I identified my where I'm most productive, that being in the mornings. So usually I would have this schedule where I wake up early, do my work, and then when I come back from school, I can focus on my extracurriculars. Since I'm usually tired after school, I can use that time to invest in, for example, the life part of work and life. So in that sense, you wouldn't get overexhausted by work, or you wouldn't be able to procrastinate by doing too much of the life aspect.
So I would actually advise everyone to finish the CAT or like competitions or out of school activities before year 13 or like before the end of year 12, because trust me, you won't have any time for these things in year 13, so I'll get those done.
It was definitely a very enriching experience because we got to know about like current issues in the healthcare field, and also we got to experience things like grand rounds and journal clubs that we'll have to do in medical school. Like it was very different from anything I've done before, and there were also quite a few interesting sessions. Like for example, I remember once we had to instruct a friend to fold origami, or like try breaking bad news to your friend, like when prepping for the interview sessions. Like these were like quite interesting activities that I had a lot of fun, and I also learned a lot from the experience.
I feel like what I enjoyed the most about the medical pathway program is being together in a certain group of people who share the same passion as you is really interesting. So learning about their different motivations and passions to go for the same field that you're going in for.
You get challenged on what you say, you know, and it's the first time, at least I, in sort of a scientific space, sort of said something and someone went, "You sure? Like, you sure about that?" type thing. So and it's good to get used to people going sort of, "Do you think you're correct?" And you're not sure if they think you're correct or not. You just have to justify it yourself and be confident enough in what you're saying.
So like it's been a month of school, and actually there are already quite a few occasions where the lecturer is talking about a medical condition or concept, and I've researched on this before, like during the medical pathways program. So like that just goes to show like the content and the knowledge that we learn from the program is like very relevant in medical school. And so aside from the knowledge itself, I think that the skills that we learned through doing grand round presentations and journal clubs, they really provided me with the correct mindset on how to approach clinical scenarios and how to like possibly also approach clinical research. And so I think, yeah, like in terms of both knowledge and skills, like the medical pathways program has been really useful in medical school so far.
Okay, so we'll just jump straight into now the applications process. So first of all, just a little overview of what's required for the 3 different medical pathways degrees that most of our students go in for. So for all 3, a personal statement will be required, different lengths for Hong Kong and for the UK. For medicine, there are entrance tests for all universities. For veterinary medicine, the only university that has entrance tests is usually Cambridge University. Dentistry also has UK entrance tests as well, the same ones that the medics will take. For all 3 subjects, there are, in almost all circumstances, interviews as well. And these have been conducted mostly online for the past few years, but prior to the pandemic, they have also been conducted in person. Even for the UK, either here in Hong Kong, or some students actually used to fly over to the UK and attend interviews at the main campus of the university. So for medicine and for veterinary medicine and dentistry, you're only allowed to apply for 4 of these medical schools. The other one choice that you have on your UCAS application for the UK is reserved for a backup choice. So something like biomedicine, biochemistry, usually another science related degree. So Hong Kong, the main thing to note, I'm sure you saw in the profiles, were that the students have very, very high IB grades. What the universities essentially ask for 43 points or 42 points and above for medicine. Dentistry is fairly similar in Hong Kong at HKU. Perhaps the grade score is slightly lower, 1 or 2 points lower, but still well over 40, so still extremely competitive. And across the board, the interviews are often the area that our students find the most challenging, particularly the UK-based interviews, the UK universities. They have very challenging interviews in terms of multiple stations, and all sorts of different skills are tested. And these the students tend to find these perhaps the most difficult part of the entrance process. So as you can see, a lot is needed for all 3 degree pathways. So just a little bit of a difference between Hong Kong and the UK. These are just kind of broad strokes. And what I would like to emphasize throughout today is that, research is key. So for whatever your particular situation is and what your interests are, it really is important to research the degree, the university, and look for all the information available online. So generally speaking, for Hong Kong, we have a grade average of 43 to 44 as the point score that is required. But for the UK, these are a little bit lower. So usually the universities will only require somewhere in the region of 36 to 39 points. So you can see it's a significantly lower IB grade score for UCAS, which is the UK application centralized system. For both universities in Hong Kong and the UK, specific IGCSE grades are often requested. So these will be things like in English and in maths, etc. So it's always good to find out exactly what the specific GCSE grade requirements are for your particular chosen degree and chosen university. In general, for veterinary science and veterinary medicine, the IB scores are a little bit lower in both Hong Kong. The UK, the veterinary medicine scores can also be a little lower than for medicine. So they are again somewhere in the range of maybe low 30s to high 30s. It's quite a high range. The one thing to note about HKU is the interview partly was in Cantonese. So the proficiency in Cantonese is a requirement for Hong Kong U applications. This is not the case with CUHK. So some of our students who are perhaps not as confident with Cantonese have been very successful in applying for and gaining places at CUHK. The UK interviews tend to be a little bit more challenging than the Hong Kong ones. They tend to test a wider range of skills. They last for longer as well. So there are some differences there. So really the key differences are the academic point score, the UK being a little bit lower than Hong Kong, but the interview process is perhaps a little bit more challenging in the UK. But as with all of the different degrees, research is key because there are very specific requirements for either HL-IB scores or for specific IGCSE scores. So it's vital that you look at the specific university websites in order to make sure that you're either choosing the right subjects and also you're aware of what your subject requirements are for your GCSE grade. So those of you in year 11, you're moving ever closer to your exams, and those of you in year 10 as well, these are going to be extremely important. And of course, when you start to select your HL subjects for year 12, you will need to also just make sure that you have researched a wide range of universities that you're interested in, because some universities will ask for specific courses such as AA Maths, HL Maths. Some universities say it's okay not to have biology. Some universities say you must have biology. For all universities, you will have to have chemistry as well. So the requirements slightly vary depending on the university itself. Okay, so other key components beyond just the basics of getting excellent grades at GCSE and IB and making it through your interview processes and entrance tests. So the GCSE, IGCSE predicted grades and IB grades form the academic pillar of your application. You also should have good work experience. Now, this could be based in a clinical setting, so that's a hospital, outpatient surgery, GP surgery, but it could also be around volunteering in a caring context. It could also be laboratory and research based. Many students have a variety of different experiences. We also expect super-curricular. So these are very different from extracurriculars, which are things that, you know, are outside of the academics. Super-curriculars are on top of your academics. So they're related to the degree that you are interested in. So these are things like reading, online courses or in-person lectures, podcasts, documentaries, and external competitions, usually in the field of science, such as biology and chemistry Olympiads, math Olympiads, etc. And then, of course, in the UK, there are entrance exams to do as well. The two main ones for dentistry and medicine are UCAT, the majority of universities ask for a UCAT, and then there's also the BMAT, which fewer universities ask for, but those universities include the extremely competitive top end, such as Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial. So as well as all of these things being submitted as your part of your portfolio of application, once you have got through these basics, the interview is the next thing, and the attributes that they're looking for really are that it's a student who is a confident and excellent communicator. They have to be extremely organized and be able to balance all of these requirements alongside attaining extra their predicted grades being very high. Usually the students who elect to apply for these degrees are extremely committed and mature. And of course, empathy and being a scientifically analytical person is also essential. Should you have all of these requirements in place to the standard that your university would like, then you'll be interviewed either online or in person, depending on the circumstances, and then they will make a holistic decision with all of that information in front of them and make a decision on whether you would be suitable for a offer for medicine, veterinary, or dentistry. So I think you can see here that there is a really quite a big demand on the students if they want to commit to studying a degree associated with these. So let's break these down a little bit more individually. So for academics, usually we see a profile of students with typically all A stars, A's, 8s and 9s at GCSE. Most of our students happen to be IGCSE triple science students, and as you saw, the vast majority of those are all A stars / all 9s in their science subjects. Because this is, relatively speaking, GCSEs are really quite simple compared to IBs and, of course, compared to med school. Many universities will have specific English and maths requirements, so it's absolutely essential that you check those. For IBs, chemistry and biology would be the ideal combination. Now, some universities do say that biology is not required, but I do think you place yourself at a disadvantage by not studying biology because it's simply the most similar subject. In addition, during the pathway program, we read academic journals, we discuss cases, and without an IB biology, an HL IB biology grounding, I don't think you would get the most out of that. And certainly at the more academic universities such as Cambridge and Oxford and Imperial, you will disadvantage yourself immensely because their interviews are academically based. And if you don't study biology, you will miss out on a whole lot of information that you will require to access those interviews. HL Maths is not required by every university. However, some universities do ask for it and some universities do prefer it. So again, research is key. Some universities also have specific point requirements for HLs. For example, they might cite 776 in HLs, including biology, chemistry, and one other HL subject. So again, I want to just emphasize, you must make sure that you are doing your due diligence and checking the individual requirements of each university. The second pillar we discussed before is work experience. As things are opening up, we're hoping that this is going to be a bit easier to find. Most students organize this for themselves. Hong Kong doesn't unfortunately have a set up system as they do in the UK to make links between Year 12 students and work experience placements. But we are trying to also look at maybe creating some links with our alumni and parent body to maybe help with the students finding these placements. But these placements can be in a wide range of areas, such as in clinics and hospitals and labs. For veterinary science, it's very particular in some universities. They actually have specific numbers of hours and specific types of animals that you will have had to have exposure to in different settings. Increasingly for the past few years, there's been online work experience, and some of these programs are still available, which we'll send out in the information that will come out next week. So do have a look at that to get a taster of what work experience online would be like. But most of our students elect to do the majority of their clinical work experience between year 12 and year 13. So that means in the summer between turning from year 12 into year 13. But other things that actually many of you listening today can also already get started with is volunteering. So one of the key kind of catchphrases that we look for in these medical applicants is a long-term commitment to caring. This is sort of a not just a one-off or a, you know, I visited a volunteering center or charity a few times. No, this is something that you commit to over several terms, maybe even a year or two. And it can be in settings with older children, older people, younger children, differently able people. But the emphasis here is that you are getting out there and experiencing what people who are very different from yourself, how they are experiencing their lives, and to build relationships, communication skills, and empathy. It's always helpful to ask for reference letters, even though there is no specific demand for these as part of the applications process. But it's always good because, number one, you can see, you know, some reflections on how you did, and also it's good just for your portfolio as well. So the key thing here with volunteering is that there's no such thing as, you know, the perfect work experience or volunteering. It's really about exposing yourself to people who you may not necessarily come into contact with, but you absolutely would as a doctor, or in the case of veterinary science, you know, to animals. And also it's starting to build those relationships with other people and or with pet owners. And of course, it's looking at the lived experiences of other people different from yourselves as well. So a wide variety of things would be suitable. So having a look at super-curriculars, this is something that absolutely everyone on this webinar, students, I mean, would be able to start doing now. And I know some of you have, because you've spoken to me about it already. So these are things like self-directed things related to your degree of interest. So this could be keeping up to date with healthcare news in reliable broadsheet newspapers, scientific journals, reading medicine-related books. We had a recent launch of lots of medicine-related books in the library, so you can look out for those if you're interested. This is just showing that you are really committed to the subject and you have taken the time and made the effort to keep up to date with what the issues are in the profession that you are seeking to join. There's lots of different things that you can access for free: courses, lectures, tasted podcasts. We have a lot of these linked into the information sheet that will come out to you. And also it's worth having a chat to your science teachers about these as well. All of us have our little kind of particular favorites, super-curricular things that you can do. So it's really worthwhile checking those out. And you can do those in year 10 and year 11. It's never too early to start. Okay. We don't say that there's particularly any preferred activities, but really you should be steering it towards something that you're interested in. And the key thing here isn't to do something really, really fancy and something really exciting, although of course those can be good as well. The key thing that the universities are looking for is that you are reflecting on these and showing that you have had a chance to think about what it is that you learned and how this is going to make you a better vet, a better doctor, a better dentist. So really reading a book and having interesting and insightful reflections is just as valuable as attending a very fancy course. So really here the thing is to steer yourself to something that you're interested in, and what you learned and your reflections are the most important part. So the final pillar here is the entrance test. So I know this is a little bit early for most of you listening if you're in year 10, year 11 to think about that, but we'll just introduce you to it briefly. You really need to turn your attention over to this once you're in year 12. So These are the two entrance tests for UK medics and dentists. The BMAT is also applicable for veterinary medics who want to apply to Cambridge as well. So these tests are only valid for 1 year. So they are only valid for the year that you sit them in. So if you want to apply another year, you have to resit them again. So in the following year, I mean. So the UCAT is usually taken either at the end of the summer in between year 12 and year 13, or right at the beginning of year 13. So typically something like August or September of the beginning of year 13 of term 1. The sections include questions about reasoning, decision making, and situational judgment. Now, the BMAT is quite different. This is usually taken in either October and November. Dates have varied a little bit in the last 2 years. It's taken in the October and November of year 13. The BMAT format is quite different. It emphasizes problem solving, analysis, comprehension, but there is also a test of your GCSE biology, chemistry, physics, and maths knowledge. So you do actually have to be extremely familiar with the content that you revise for your GCSEs. There is also an essay writing section, a short essay with very interesting prompts, which will be evaluated for content and for quality of writing. The BMAT is required by few universities, but as mentioned before, it's required by those very top ends, so Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, and 1 or 2 others as well. Now, what we want to emphasize with this is that we expect the students to prepare for these tests and register for these tests independently. It's one of the very first indicators of whether you are a suitable candidate to be on this pathway. If you can successfully prepare for these tests and take them and get a competitive score, that's an indication that you are along the right tracks. And of course, we need all of the other parts of the application to be correct as well. However, if students score poorly, this will then be a good initial indicator that perhaps the rigorousness and the skills required at medical school is perhaps not quite right for them, or at least not quite right at this point in their lives. It may be something that they can look into as a postgraduate degree later on. So it's really important to know that these are required and that you will be expected to prepare and take them independently. So then finally, we move on to the thing that probably intimidates most students, the interview. So the interview process is usually in 2 formats, either a traditional panel interview with 2 interviewers. The questions can range from anything about, why you want to be a doctor, a vet, a dentist, the skills that you've learned, the work experience, your reflections, supercurriculars, and always some ethical scenarios. And sometimes they can be academic as well. So the more academic leaning universities will ask very technical scientific questions and aim to stretch you and see how teachable essentially you are. The other popular format is the mini interview. So the multiple mini interviews, MMIs for short. These are a series of, can be up to sort of 7 or 8 short stations of usually less than 10 minutes. And each station will have a different focal point. So some stations will be a role play with an actor where they're testing your communication skills. Some stations will be data analysis questions or mathematical questions of calculating drug dosages, etc. Some stations will be sort of almost like a mini panel about your motivations, your personal experience, your work experience, etc., personal statement. Some stations might be about ethics and professional judgment. So it's a real wide range at different universities, but it is very challenging for the students who have never really faced this sort of thing before to be able to prepare and successfully ace these. So wanted to just touch upon a little bit about choosing a university. This is really quite a challenge, and there are some things to consider. So these are some of the things that you perhaps want to have a conversation with your student about, or with your parents about, depending on who's listening. So the style and the content of the course, you have to sort of research into that first. So there are things that there are sort of more traditional courses which emphasize the scientific understanding first. So the Hong Kong universities tend to be quite like that, and some of the universities in the UK, such as Cambridge and Oxford. This is then leading into a little bit more clinical work later on in the degree, versus some other universities which tend to integrate a lot of patient contact and skills-based stuff very early on in the course, and perhaps do not emphasize so much of the detailed scientific. Obviously, there's enough science to be a successful doctor, but perhaps not as much as some of the other more traditional universities. Obviously, the modules will be different as well, so you must make sure that you're looking at the style of teaching and how they deliver their content. So there'll be a variety of different ways that the content will be delivered. A really popular way of learning is case-based or problem-based learning, which is small group discussion based on a clinical case, and it's quite independent, which some students really appreciate and really thrive in, but others might find a bit more challenging. Supervisions and tutorials, these are small group things, especially places like Cambridge and Oxford have particular small group teachings, which is an extremely kind of a challenging situation. It's extremely enriching, but it's also very challenging because it's you and a supervisor or a tutor, so there's nowhere to hide. So that suits some students, but it may not others. Of course, there will always be lectures and lab-based assignments, etc. Some universities also offer what we call an intercalated year. So this is a year taken usually either in the fourth year. It's quite common to take it during the fourth year, but the time is can vary for different universities, where you actually take a year off your medical degree and you gain a BA or BSc in a related degree. So you might go and study something like further anatomy or biochemistry, something a little bit related but a little bit different. So you would actually graduate both with a medical degree but also with a bachelor's in whatever that you decided to intercalate in. And that's a good research opportunity for lots of students if they wanted to try something a little bit different, and especially for those students who have perhaps interest in clinical research as well. Of course, the country and the city is a big factor in where you might decide to go and which entrance test you think you might want to take. We do strongly advise students not to take both because it's a lot of work to come prepare for one, let alone two. So, you know, it may also influence you as to which test you're going to focus on, and therefore that will limit somewhat the universities that you're applying for. Also, you must consider, where do you want to work after qualifying? So if you want to be based in Hong Kong, you know, it might be the easiest to apply for a Hong Kong place. If you are based in if you want to work in the UK, then that's a consideration as well. Of course, if you want to work in a different country of your qualification, there may be licensing exams involved and visas, etc. So this again is something that you must make sure that you're informing yourself of, so that you're looking ahead for when you graduate, where do you want to work? And of course, the wider university itself. You know, different universities have very different kind of values and visions, so it's and styles. So it's good to kind of get an idea of, well, is this university the right fit for me? Because, you know, you will be spending a lot of time with fellow vets, medics, dentists, etc. But you'll also be spending time in and around other places in the campus or in and around the city if it's a city-based university. So thinking a little bit wider about, is this university the right fit for me as well, is also a good thing to think about before choosing. So there are some additional considerations that we did want to mention that perhaps weren't as obvious to people embarking on these decisions and these journeys. So some universities for these degrees have a minimum age requirement. For example, you must be at least 18 years old on the day that the degree starts, so the 1st of October or whatever the start date of the term time is. Of course, as international students, we must also consider the cost. So particularly, I just plucked a university just to demonstrate the international tuition fee for Exeter is £38,500 a year, and bearing in mind that the clinical years, the later years where you're based more in hospitals and getting a lot more patient contact, this could be even more expensive. We have seen fees per year go up to maybe something like 60-something thousand pounds per year. So, you know, it is a significant amount of money. So it's something to kind of consider. There's also the kind of the hidden costs that you might not be aware of that we also wanted to just point out. So for example, if you're an international student, if you study in the UK, if you're sent out to a hospital a little bit further away from where your main campus is and where your main student accommodation is, local NHS-based students, home students, would get free accommodation for these clinical placements, but as international students, this would not be the case for you. So you may actually have to pay additional accommodation fees alongside what you're already paying for your main accommodation, additional accommodation and additional travel costs. These can all mount up, especially in expensive places such as London, etc. So it's just something to be aware of, that there are lots of upfront fees, which can be quite high and can vary quite a lot from university to university. So again, it's worth checking a wide variety. But then it's also the hidden costs that some of you may not be aware of that perhaps needs to just be thought about as well. So what we also wanted to just include this as well. So many of you, listening are a few years away from these decisions. So, what if you are not 100% sure that medicine's right for you, or perhaps you're not 100% sure that you will be academically in the right place for that. So having the right point scores, having the right profiles, making it through interview, a lot of things have to line up, and there's a big dollop of luck in there as well, of course. So perhaps if you weren't successful in the countries of your first choice, such as the UK and Hong Kong, which are two most popular areas, there are alternative programs that teach medicine in English in other countries, such as Malta, Ireland, Czech Republic, etc. However, just a word of warning there, you have to make sure that you're doing your research, because if you qualify from these countries, does that limit the where you can actually work? Do you have to take additional licensing exams after you qualify? These are considerations that you must make sure that you're researching before taking the decision to make an application to these alternative countries. There's also graduate medicine, which is a shortened degree, usually 4 years instead of 5 or 6, because most of the degrees in medicine are either 5 or 6 years. This is extremely competitive, so this is by no means an easier option. However, I think it's a great a pathway for students who perhaps are not very sure that they want to commit to medicine straight out of high school. Then a lot of students elect to take biochemistry or biomedicine, or do a science-related degree, to further explore that area, and hopefully they graduate with a very good degree result from a very good university. And as a slightly more mature 21, 22-year-old, you may be in a position to decide, actually, yes, I would like to commit to studying medicine and joining the profession. And perhaps you're just in a little bit more of a settled point of your life as well to make that decision. And then you can go for graduate entry, but it's extremely competitive as well. Of course, there are lots and lots of other allied health professionals who work very closely alongside doctors, and this applies equally for dentists and vets as well, so allied vet professionals and dental professionals as well. So there are many, many roles for students who might be interested in something related to this, but perhaps don't want to fully commit to such a long degree or such a challenging degree, or they simply perhaps just don't have the grades that are appropriate for a competitive pathway application. So these are things like physiotherapists, these are radiographers, nursing as well. There's lots and lots of different areas that you can explore. So there are some links on the website that we will share with you next week as well, where you can have a look at some of these alternative related degrees. And of course, without these allied health professionals, the care of patients or the care of animals simply would not occur. So they're extremely important jobs as well. Okay, so just a little bit about the timeline. Most of you, as I said, are very early on right now. So a lot of you listening are either year 10 or year 11 students, or parents of year 10 or year 11 students. So right now, what you should be doing is you should be giving this some serious thought, thinking about your application, doing lots and lots of research and discussing whether you think this is the right thing for you with your friends, your trusted adults in your life, like your counselors, your teachers, etc., and your parents and family. You can also start to do some things like volunteering, so choosing CAS activities that have a lot more of a service focus. Of course, maintain the sports and the creative things that you want to do, but a more service-leaning set of CAS activities would be beneficial, because then you would put yourself in positions where you would, perhaps be caring for or teaching older people, younger students, etc., just to see if you have some of the correct skills, or at least try to develop some of those correct skills that you will need later on. Super-curricular activities such as reading, lectures, books, etc., that's very, very simple to do now, and hopefully that will add some interest and some relevance to what you're studying in the classroom as well. And of course, those of you who are in year 11, you are also considering your IB courses, right, and finalizing those. So it's having the conversations, doing the research, what what universities am I interested in, what specific requirements do they have around specific IB subjects, and have conversations with each other, have conversations with your science teachers, your counselors, etc., to make sure that you are making the right choices come IB time. A little bit further down the road in all grey boxes, which is a little bit far away from all of you, but just to give you an idea of what's down the road if you do decide to commit, by the very beginning of year 12, we have an expectation that most of our students who are going to be successful in this pathway are locking down those grade 6s and 7s in their HLs almost immediately, straight off the bat. As you saw with the student profiles at the beginning, the students who are successful are extremely academically capable. So there cannot be any wobbles really on an academic front, because there's so much extra stuff that you're expected to get right. The absolute basics is getting the correct grades. You'll be continuing with your super-curriculars and ramping those up. And doing some volunteering and continuing with your CASP activities into year 12. You'll also then start to prepare for your entrance test somewhere around about term 2 of year 12. And then late on in term 2 is where if you are committed and you have the correct profile, you'll be invited to join the medical pathways program, which those students in the video spoke about. These are weekly discussion groups that we meet together. And we will do, we'll read articles, you'll do case study presentations, et cetera, et cetera. So designed to really extend you well beyond what you're doing in class and also start to build some of those skills necessary for interviews. In term 3, we start to turn our attention over to building that application profile, so personal statements and preparing for interviews. So we start to kind of gear up for that. That also has to be supported by clinical work experience in the summer of year 12 and year 13, and then taking any entrance tests in the summer of year 12, year 13, or at the very beginning of year 13, as I mentioned before. By this time in year 13, so term 1, we're currently going through the application process with our current year 13s. The applications are submitted. The interview starts around December time before Christmas and then run into January, February, sometimes as late as April, but most of them are done very early on, either before Christmas or in the very early part of the new year. Of course, your grades should be absolutely secure and you're turning your attention over to preparing for your mock exams at this point. And finally, should all of that come together, we should have our interviews and offers coming through by term 2 of year 13 and term 3 at the latest. The final exams for IB are in May, and hopefully on July the 5th, when the IB results are released, you get your 43, whatever is needed, and you are successfully then able to enter the medical school of your choice. So it is a really, really long pathway, and it is a commitment. And one of the students once quoted to me that it's basically like taking on an additional HL. So you're effectively doing 4 HLs instead of the usual 3, because of the time commitment that you're expected to put into preparing for discussion group, studying for entrance exams, and doing all of that additional prep that makes our students viable candidates when it comes to interview. Okay, so just to kind of summarize and reiterate and give you the key take-home messages, I think you've probably all realized that this is an extremely competitive pathway. It really does require full commitment. So really we're not after students who are sort of thinking about it, they think it sounds interesting. That's not really going to get you through the tough times where you're having to, commit to all of your academic deadlines and get all of those 6s and 7s at IB, but also participate in discussion group and also prepare for entrance tests, interviews, etc. It is a lot of work, so only those who are fully committed and absolutely sure that they want to do this, at least for now, will make it effectively. Detailed research is absolutely key. I've emphasized that along the way. Each university has slightly different requirements, slightly different subject combinations, etc. So it's really important that you do your research and you look up as much information as you can. Talk to the admissions officers. They're usually quite good at reaching out and quite transparent about their admissions process. And really, currently, for those of you listening now, I think a really key question is going: is this the right pathway for me? Not everyone has to be a doctor, a dentist, or a vet. In fact, very few people do. Seven people out of 100 and something students made it last year. So, you know, this really is not just a pathway that you take on lightly. This is something that you have to be absolutely committed to, and that you have to have the attributes and also the academic capability and the drive and commitment to make it through, because it is a tough slog, as hopefully you've realized. So that brings to the end the information portion of the presentation. I know there has been a lot there, but as I said, we will follow up with some key information that summarizes what we talked about and lots of useful links that will get you started on your research and your conversations. Okay, any questions out there?
Thanks, Dr. Carol, that was amazing. So detailed. We've got one question, which I think is a good one, just because there will be some people considering this. It's just this idea of what if someone's interested in studying medicine in the United States? That works differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's postgraduate. So actually, we don't tend to have much involvement in that. So because medicine in North America is postgraduate, you're applying as a pre-med candidate, and you know it's a very different process. So you're effectively applying as an undergraduate. So it's an extremely different process to this. So our focus on the medical pathways program is on the UK and Hong Kong, because that's where the majority of the students who apply are focused on those two countries, and those are that's the area where they need the most help. So that's why we need to sort of, well, first of all, they need to prepare for their entrance test, and then there are these very specific MMI interviews and panel interviews that the students need to undergo for Hong Kong and the UK. So that's where we focus our attention.
That's great, thank you. And then another very specific one, if someone's interested in being an eye doctor, eye surgeon, optometrist, is that right? Is that
an optometrist? Yeah, an ophthalmologist probably. Yeah, so an optometrist is someone who would test you for your eyeglasses. That's not a doctor, but an ophthalmologist, which could be a clinical or a surgical ophthalmologist, that's just a medical doctor. So for psychiatry, ophthalmology, neurology, you know, cardiothoracic, whatever specialty, hematology, whatever specialty you want to go into, you got to start at the basics. Everyone's got to get that MBBS degree first, so that medical bachelor surgery, bachelor of medicine first. Then depending on where you are, Hong Kong, UK, you go through your foundation training program, which again, you have to rotate through a number of set specialties, so GP, A&E, you know, a full wide experience, and then you start to specialize a few years into your career once you've qualified. So good starting point, guys. Don't commit to a subject too early, because you never know what's out there when you get to medical school. The eye might be fascinating now, but you might find something else later. However, medical school first, one step at a time.
Okay, and then Edith just asking, is Australia not popular for medical, or is it just that our students don't go? What's the deal?
There's not that many students. They do make an application, but the timeline is quite different. So they are on a different shifted timeline. So because the university term doesn't start until much later compared to the UK and Hong Kong, the Australian candidates have an advantage of actually having their IB results by the time that they're actually applying. So they can actually make a little bit more of an informed decision. I understand the process is quite similar. We don't have as much involvement. Again, it's not as popular, but it involves entrance tests. So again, do your due diligence in terms of research. So there's the Australian and New Zealand version of the UCAT, which is very similar to the UK one, as I understand. So that's a requirement. Interviews, of course, are a requirement. And from what I understand, and from some of our previous students, it's also extremely competitive, much like it is everywhere else. So the timeline is slightly different, but the process is fairly similar. A lot of our students do multiple applications. So for example, Hong Kong and UK, or Hong Kong and Australia. So attending the pathway program will give them the right skills that they need anyway.
Great. And I think you did touch on this, but maybe just to clarify, if a student wants to be on that medical pathway program, I mean, listening to the students in the video, it does make a difference. So how do you join? What are the criteria, I guess, for being part of that?
Yeah, so as with the MCP and the Medical Pathways Programme, it is by invitation. So I understand it's a self-nominating process first. So, you know, the students who want to be part of the programme will nominate. And then there's usually a meeting process. So usually it'll be either with me or Dr. Yu when she's here as well. And we'll discuss the students and obviously working alongside the counsellors as well. There isn't necessarily set criteria, but what we're looking for is, do you have that kind of GCSE profile that we presented at the beginning? Do you have the kind of current IB predicted grade? Because by this time they're well into year 12, so we've got a good idea of what their you know, predicted grades might be. Do you also have the right kind of attributes? You know, by the time they get to year 12, the interested students, I already know most of their names and they've already talked to me and had conversations with their science teachers. Also, do you have the right sort of super-curricular profiles? Have you done some competitions? You know, did you do the Y10 biology challenge, for example? Little things like this. So we're looking for the students primarily with the academic profile, because honestly, there's no point in making an application if you don't have that. You won't even get a foot in the door. Once that's certain, then we discuss with the students their interests, their motivations, and it really has to come from the students. So we have had cases in the past where perhaps it's they're feeling pressure from other sources. That's not terribly helpful and doesn't usually lead to success. So, you know, some open and honest conversations. Not everyone has to be a doctor or a vet or a dentist to be successful in life, you know, and it's not a pathway to force someone down if they're not committed. It's simply too hard, and that way misery lies. So, you know, we're looking for motivation, the academic profile, the skills, the support network as well. You know, is everyone on board with this? Because you're going to need to dig deep, and your whole support network will have to pull you through some hard times.
Yeah, I think that's really true, isn't it? And I think as well, just, you know, listening to this, and I think part of the point of us putting this presentation together is to say, you know, it does require an awful lot of commitment, of dedication, but also remembering that those alternative pathways that you also mentioned that are related, because we all tend to just focus on the same kind of 10 jobs, don't we? And actually there's, you know, 1,001 different related fields and careers within all of these medical pathways. So it's also about recognizing, well, where are my strengths? You know, do I want to be a doctor, or do I want to do more clinical lab-based research, because that's a different thing again, and maybe that's a different degree that I'm actually looking at. So trying to encourage students from very early on to really investigate the whole area and not just be tunnel visioned on must be a doctor or must be a vet, because actually you might be better suited to something that's related to that. So I think that's a really important message too.
Yeah, and just kind of, you know, think it's you know, work-life balance is something important. You know, I think it's a given that if you go for these degrees, you're not going to have much work-life balance. Whilst you're at university, certainly for medicine, perhaps is a little bit easier for dentistry, but you know, it's also about, you know, what is it that you want to focus on. And I think there's absolutely no embarrassment or any shame at all in actually saying, no, there are other things that might be more important to me, and you know, that is absolutely valid. So I think throwing a wide net, having an open mind, and just having those deep, honest conversations, because it's not the right pathway for everyone, and you know, you saw it's actually not the right pathway for very many people at all.
Yeah, and so thank you. I think we've reached the end of our questions, and we've done a good hour. Lots of information. Thank you so much, Carol. And as Carol said, we will share all of this with you next week, the PowerPoint, and we've also got a help sheet document as well with lots of links, etc. on it. So that'll all go back to you. So I think the message is, you know, there's lots of exciting opportunities out there, but start early, do your research, really think carefully about everything, and listen as well to the advice that you're being given along the way about whether this is the right thing for you, the wrong thing for you, if there's something else that might be a better fit. And if it is the right fit, then, you know, you need to be pushing from now to really make this work for you and make yourself, you know, the best possible applicant you can be by the time sort of year 13 comes around for you. So thank you so much to everybody. Big thank you to Dr. Song for putting it all together. big thank you to Martin for working away in the background on the questions. Thank you so much. And to VJ, who's always hiding, but literally runs all of these webinars for us, and we could not do it without him. So thank you so much, VJ, as ever. And thank you to all of you. Have a lovely, lovely evening, and we'll see you all soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.